Hello and welcome to the Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is Washington Post journalist and media politics expert Sarah Ellison. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. Please check out the links to our sponsors, Henson Shaving and Zbiotics, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It really helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Okay, James, I don't know. There may not be much to talk about. Kind of a slow week this week, right? My God. Oh, hard to keep up. The president made it official. Biden announced for re-election in a 3-minute video would emphasize the dangers MAGA Republicans pose in 2024 and also highlighted his vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, there were two decidedly different Democratic reactions, as I saw it. The public was rallying around the president. I saw two Democratic operatives on the NewsHour talking about what a powerful video this was and what solid shape the president is in. Privately, from the few people I talked to, it was a different story. Considerable concern. Politicians see polls show half of Democrats don't want Biden to run again. Little enthusiasm among those that do. Polls worry that this lack of energy might cost them down ballot, that the only really good thing he has going for him is Trump, that running at best, even in the midst of a strong economy and a record of he really has robust achievements in healthcare, infrastructure, and climate, still only running even. James, I think we agree there is a simple explanation: age. The Fox News narrative that Biden is semi-senile is a lie, but he does show his age, and it isn't going to get any better. Colored Democrats worried.
Well, I'll give you the optimistic scenario. It's not unreasonable. Okay. It takes a while for an economic recovery to take hold in the public's mind. We saw that in the 94 elections. We certainly saw it in 2010. Both came back in 96 and 2012 and won, and perception economy were decidedly better.
Right.
And so I pass this is, there are two hopes. That look, you can look at that NBC Heart Research poll, and this is not anything good in it other than people can't stand Trump, but that's about it. But that is it's not I don't know if it's likely, but it's certainly not an unreasonable hope that people start feeling this, these infrastructure projects start taking hold, the wages start going up because you're having strong employment everywhere. And you get Trump, some deeply flawed candidate, and you're probably in some position to win the elections, and that's where we are. I mean, what worries me profoundly and deeply is that Pew poll had a black approval of 59 for President Biden. Listeners to this show will know that I've been literally sounding the alarm about tepid black turnout in 2022 and even beyond that. So let's hope that because if we don't get some more enthusiasm about that, the best we can hope for is a kind of repeat of 2020, but that's the best. And I don't know without black turnout, I don't even know if that's possible. So there's a reasonable path to win, and there are reasonable things to worry about.
Yeah, you cited the polls. Both an NBC and Wall Street Journal poll out last weekend. They used to be together. They were better when they were together. But I will, I'll cite the Heart Research poll also. It's just one bad number after another for Biden and the Democrats. 75% think the country's in the wrong direction. President's disapproval in the mid to high 50s. Vice President Harris's numbers are worse. The only good news, as you suggested, is Donald Trump isn't doing any better, in some cases doing worse. And James, lost in the blizzard of political news this week, including the New York opening of a rape case against Trump, was the warning by Fani Willis, the Fulton County DA, that she expects a decision this summer on charges that Trump tried to manipulate the 2020 Georgia election results. Now, here's what's interesting. She called on law enforcement to be ready for unrest. Now, talking to Georgia sources, it's not hard to read between those lines. There ain't going to be any unrest if some lower-level phony elector is indicted. This is about Trump being indicted. And that would be a case that looks more clear-cut than the Manhattan case. And Mar-a-Lago and January 6th may be right around the corner. Now, that is good news for Democrats. However, let me just pose this. If these cumulative disasters ultimately undo Trump, and I still believe that there's a real possibility of that, is that good or is that bad for Biden?
Well, first of all, you're exactly right about the Fulton County DA. I guess if they don't charge anybody, there could be a 3-person demonstration in front of the Whole Foods in Buckhead, but that's about all that would happen.
Don't go to Gucci that day, right?
right. The faculty at, the humanities faculty at Emory will be profoundly depressed. But what were you asking? I got.
No, I was going to say, I think, if Fani Willis does indict Trump this summer, Mar-a-Lago, January 6th, right around the corner, he could, that rape case is up in New York. But after a while, it just gets so bad that it may undo him. I think that is still very possible. My question is, if it does, is that good or bad for Biden?
First of all, I held your view. I moved away from your view. I might be, if anything, inching a little bit closer to your view. I don't know. I mean, I don't even if let's say that they just knock him off. The legal sit just becomes too much. By the way, he could get charged with rape in New York if this civil jury comes back. It's going to put enormous pressure on Alvin Bragg because that statute in Eugene Carroll, they changed that statute that had, we call it prescription in Louisiana, the statute of limitations in the rest of the country. There's so much stuff that's mounting up. I don't know how the guy can withstand the legal pressure that he is under, and it's only going to get more intense. There's no way that it doesn't. And the Proud Boys, I guess, Oath Keepers, some of these assholes are on trial right now. I think they're closing arguments yesterday. And they saying, well, don't blame us, it was all Trump's fault. So, Jack Smith could still indict him on the January 6th stuff.
Right. And William Barr says Mar-a-Lago is the biggest worry of all.
Right. So when you go through it, it's so much coming, and it's probably going to come, in legal time, which takes longer than normal time, is probably coming together pretty soon here. And I don't know. I think everybody was so traumatized by the Robert Mueller stuff, but it don't seem like Jack Smith is Robert Mueller or Fani Willis is Robert Mueller. Clearly. The thing I want to ask you about is them calling Pomerantz, and remind our listeners who Pomerantz is and where this is, because I think this is going to be an important piece of testimony.
It is. Mark Pomerantz was a very tough lawyer and former prosecutor in Manhattan who was hired by Cyrus Vance to investigate Trump. He wanted to bring charges against Trump, and then when Vance's term expired and Alvin Bragg was elected, Bragg decided not to bring those charges, much broader charges than the charge that Bragg brought on, lying about the and covering up the payment to what's her name? I'm having a senior moment now, James. But so it was a much bigger deal, and so Pomerantz resigned, and he wrote a book about it. And Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, has subpoenaed Pomerantz to appear on May the 12th, obviously to say bad things about Bragg. However, if I'm the Democrats, I'm thinking, my God, this is the guy that thought that Trump was worse than Bragg. They thought there was even a bigger case. They thought he was even more of a total crook. If I'm Dan Goldman or other people, I've got questions. I just can't wait for Mark Pomerantz to testify. This may be a real blunder on Jordan's part, James.
There's got to be some other explanation for it, because what you say to me sounds like, from everything I know, it seems like a colossally stupid thing. Now, maybe Jim Jordan is a colossally stupid man. I don't want to discount that possibility at all. Some people say he has decent staff. I don't know that. I don't know. Obviously, don't know his staff.
Hasn't shown so far, has it?
No. And I wish somebody would say, what the fuck are you thinking? Because I can't figure it out. And maybe there's something we don't know. I have to acknowledge that that's a possibility. But based on the knowledge I have, and you have, and people that we know have, people are just kind of flummoxed. What are they doing?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Pomerantz says, look, I think this is a weak case, that Bragg has brought. Okay, fine. Chalk one up for Jim Jordan. And then Dan Goldman and the Democrats come in and say, well, so therefore Trump is okay. Oh, no. Trump is even a bigger crook. He should have been indicted for this. Here's what we found.
Right. I don't get it, but I guess that the immediate thing, if he's going to come in and say that the case is weak based on probably the person's birth name was Stephanie Clifford of Baton Rouge, right, Louisiana. She's now Stormy Daniels. Just so I want to be sure we get all the credit in the world for this.
How could I have forgotten that name even momentarily, James?
That, right. Anyway, that happens when you get our age. But I don't know. You're right. And just of all of the crushing, agonizing legal problem, and we forget like stuff that we even forget. Like his lawyer had to turn over the notes.
Right.
I can't begin to tell you what you'd have to do to get a lawyer's notes for a federal judge to sign off on that, but it would have to be something remarkable.
Well, I'm sure Pomerantz will say that Michael Cohen is not a reputable and not a believable witness, and he wasn't, his case wasn't relying on Cohen. I think, that may well be true. But boy, overall, as I say, if I'm the Democrats, I'm not dreading that hearing, to put it mildly.
I think the least of Trump's worries is the Stephanie Clifford case. He could get convicted. Most of the times they do, but compared to this other stuff, oh Jesus, he wouldn't get any jail time off of that anyway. I would. What he did was clearly wrong. I just think back, if we would have paid off a porn star with non-reportable money to keep a story out in October of 1992, the wrath of God would have fallen on us. But standards of the country have deteriorated considerably, and I don't know. But I think if I'm him, I got a lot of crap. I'm much more worried about this. The other thing is, we see why he fought so hard to stay in office. He knew all this. Okay?
Yeah.
He knew he was a criminal.
That's the only way he was immune from prosecution, was being president of the United States.
He's like a Latin American politician.
Hell, he'd have repealed the 22nd Amendment and stayed forever if he could have.
Yeah, absolutely.
James, just to close the loop, the question I was asking you about whether it was good or bad for Biden if Trump really, really was undone, the whole Biden rationale has been he's beaten Trump before he can do it again. Suppose he runs against someone else. Now, we both agree Ron DeSantis has had just a terrible month, so I don't know who it would be. But I'm just saying, running against someone else who's 30 or 40 years younger, I don't know, that may be more worrisome.
If he fell apart, if he'd run against Brian Kemp, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd nominate him, but, I don't know if they go. I don't think they're going to go to Nikki Haley. But, you got, a lot of slimy characters out there, that if Trump drops out, the Ted Cruz's or the Josh Hawley's of the world, Marsha Blackman, that whole freak show would jump in there like crazy. But yeah, if they nominate a Brian Kemp, they're not going to nominate Chris Sununu, but if they did, a Chris Christie, which they're not, but they'd win.
Yeah, they would. The other story this week is everything's getting overwhelmed by Tucker Carlson and Joe Biden. But House Republicans finally have a budget plan as part of a threat to otherwise sabotage the debt ceiling, which, of course, would throw America into a default and maybe wreak havoc on the economy. Of course, the Republican plan is blue smoke and mirrors. We're going to cap discretionary spending for the next 10 years, they say. Well, are you going to cap everything? Veterans programs, air traffic controllers? Of course not. But we're not going to tell you the specifics. We're going to be duplicitous about that. I mean, we are going to do things like kill the increased funding for the under-resourced IRS, which they say would help the deficit. Actually, wouldn't. It would cost money, because you wouldn't be able to go after those tax cheats.
Yeah, it's provable.
Right. And their last-minute gambit is to go to please Matt Gaetz. We keep listing the House despicables, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Lauren Boeberts, the Paul Gosters. We have to understand that club is much bigger, James. Matt Gaetz is a co-captain of that team. You wouldn't let your children anywhere near Matt Gaetz. And he's going to make it much harder for poor people to get food stamps, because they got to have some kind of a job, but he's going to prescribe. Pure and simple, this is a con game.
Well, I'm going to take a substantial issue with you on a word that you use. I think you'll agree that you'll want to strike that word in the record and substitute another. To call what they put forward a budget is ludicrous.
I stand corrected.
Okay, I knew you would, and to err is human, whatever. All right, it ain't remotely a budget, right. And we need to stay on the fact that they have no budget. They have some sloppy talking, some overall thing that don't even tell you what's in it. I mean, you talk about a giant con. The idea, again, everybody is like, well, they'll figure something out. I don't know if these crazy sons of bitches are not going to just drive this whole thing in a ditch. And I don't know that their rationale would be, yeah, it'll hurt the economy, people, but people blame Biden. The other thing is, all of the things I hear, that minting $1 trillion coin, in the Constitution it says the debt of the United States shall not be questioned. That's in the document. I don't know how. How do you get around that? I'm sure Alito and Thomas and them would come up with something, because they just come up with anything.
They always do.
They always do. Somebody paid them. They made enough money. They could figure, This story about Gorsuch selling his house to the head of this law firm with this huge Supreme Court practice. And that's it. In Harlan Crow buying Clarence Thomas's mother's house. Jesus, man. What is going on here? And I'm sorry, this is just not ordinary stuff. This is not the kind of crap that goes on all the time. I don't think so. I really don't.
No, I agree with you. It's not. It clearly is not. So I apologize for using the term budget. You're right.
Okay,
but
all right.
No apologies, and I think you would agree with me as describing Matt Gaetz as a general scumbag.
Well, I think he might be in the top 10, but I don't know if he could break the top 5. Maybe.
Boy, I don't know. I think I'd put him up there. I'll tell you one thing I heard, and this is not a guy who I'd put in that top 10 group, but there's a right-winger from Texas named Chip Roy, who is a real right-winger. Yeah. And I was told that, the guy who's really trying to work all this out to let McCarthy go, the guy can come up with something is Chip Roy. Well, when Chip Roy is the guy, putting things together, man alive, does that tell you everything you need to know about the caucus?
It's like saying James Carville Al Hunt are in charge of the invasion plan. Ain't going to go well.
or in charge of our technology, right?
Right, yeah. We're leading the tech section. That's about what. They have so many that we just Chip Roy being that, my favorite, my guy from Louisiana, who's Clay Higgins. He can't get that. He's too stupid to get the oxygen that Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or Paul Gosar or Matt Gaetz get, but they certainly capable of playing in that league.
They are. I don't think Roy is in that league. I think he's just an extremist. I don't think he's crazy the way Boebert and Gaetz and Higgins.
I don't know if Clay Higgins. I don't know if he's he's just crazy, extreme to the nth degree. I guess you gotta get people like just slimy people like Jim Jordan or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert who just have, I don't know that, I can't say that Chip Roy or Clay Higgins are covered in personal life slime. That I can't do. But I know they're idiots, but you got a lot of idiots that are not slimy people.
Yeah, you do. Okay, we'll keep watching this, and we'll keep watching that presidential race, and we'll keep watching and take the over-under on how many indictments Trump will face by October.
Well, you do counts or just, is that one indictment in New York or 34?
Let's go easy on him. Let's just go venues. We'll go, but we'll throw in the Carroll case, even though that's not an indictment yet.
Well, it could be. Again, it could be
right.
Because the statute of limitations and civil jury. Now, I think most of our viewers understand this. The standard to prevail in a civil case is a preponderance of the evidence. So if the finder of fact, in this case the jury, thinks that it's kind of 52-48, they could find for Eugene Carroll.
Okay, let me throw down a marker, James. By October, the over-under, by October 23, over or under, and let all of our viewers write in on what you think it'll be. More than 3 indictments or less than 3 indictments by October 20.
So 3 would be in addition to the Bragg.
Yes, it would be. It would be 2 more.
So it would be. You possibly. Well, of course, Jack Smith could indict on January 6th. He could indict on the documents. He could indict. I don't know how many obstruction of justice charges there are.
Well, let's say Jack Smith has 2. Mar-a-Lago on January 6th. That would be 2. Fannie Willis has 1, and then, as you just pointed out, there could be 1. So there are 4 more possibilities. So we'll
2.5.
Okay.
2.5 is over under.
All right. We're there.
You win at 3, you lose at 2.
All right.
Take the under, take the over.
Everybody keep, send your bets to us. Send them to @Politicon.
Right, there you
go. Okay, let's do the outrage. All right, the outrage of the, I'll tell you what, we'll do the ads now.
All right.
Now, is 538 going to go under, James? Because weren't they owned by Disney?
Yeah. Well, ABC, I think they were under contract with ABC. But, it's pointed out that he was a big promoter that the Republicans going to have this big year in 2022. And the kind of leading skeptic was a war room veteran named Simon Rosenberg, who's done pretty well. He said we should get Simon on the show because he's been right about more things than wrong. And, he's a good guy. He's talented and he's been around. And, the thing about Nate Silver, he's like in 2012, he was white hot. I mean, just white hot.
Yeah, he was.
And it's hard to, the one thing about this business we know is, we've seen you can be white hot, and some people, if you get too white hot, you'll get down too far.
He also had he had some good people who've gone on to other things. Henson Shaving. Hey, James, when you're trying to look and feel on top of your game, which is important as you get old like we have, you need the best razor. Meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station and Mars rover. And now they are bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. Now, how great of a shave does Henson offer you, James?
Every time I shave with this product, I think of, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon. I think of like Apollo 13, which, by the way, I think is a top 10 movie of all time. All freaking time. I mean, that thing was so well done.
It really was.
I think about the Mars. What it does is it's a terrific product that gives you a terrific shave, and it forces you, it encourages you to think about history. And that's what I like. I mean, your mind wanders every time you use it. And you think about just all the markers that they had, where were you on July 20th, 1969? Or we were in school and we'd watch John Glenn. I mean, just what space has meant to people of our generation and what it's going to mean in the future is amazing. And this product just takes you back in it.
Well, I'm sitting here in my son's guest room. When he comes back, he's in this room. There's a big picture of John Glenn up there. And someday I'll tell our listeners about why John Glenn is our family hero and what an extraordinary man he was. So this makes me think of John Glenn, too. When you think of razor blades, you got to think like diving boards. The longer the board, the more wobble. The more wobble, the more nicks, cuts, and scrapes. A bad shave isn't a blade problem. It's an extension problem. And you need ultimate precision. By using aerospace-grade CNC machines, Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. That means a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. Now, we've been around a long time and never had better. Now, that's not all, James. The Henson shaving razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream to make clogs impossible. Seriously, Henson Shaving wants the best razor, not the best razor business. That means no plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. Plus, they're affordable. The Henson razor works with a standard dual-edge blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of a new-school tech. And it's only about $3 to $5 per year to replace the blades. Henson handles it all. My first shave makes you feel 20 years younger, and the design and durability is unmatched. So like us, it's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/warroom to pick the razor for you and use code WARROOM, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/warroom and use code WARROOM. You can also find the link in our show notes. Hey, you know, James, there was a seismic quake in cable news in Republican circles. I guess it was like an 8 on the Richter scale, as Fox News sacked its star provocateur, Tucker Carlson. And there's no one better to analyze this for us than Sarah Ellison, a great reporter for the Wall Street Journal and Vanity Fair, and now the Washington Post enterprise correspondent on politics and media. Sarah, you are the best, and like most people, were you shocked by the Carlson news? And while there may have been multiple factors, cut to the chase as to what you think it really was all about.
I was shocked by the Carlson news. We had just gotten through the big settlement with Dominion that Fox had done, and everybody was sort of wondering what the fallout was going to be. People were looking at different executives and people that who got them into this mess. The question was it the anchors who said outrageous things on air that got them sued? Was it the executives who gave those people too little oversight and let them kind of repeat these conspiracy theories and didn't sort of rein them in? Was it the chief legal officer who both managed to let all this dirty laundry get aired out and pay $750 million? You sort of would think you would do one or the other, but not both. But no, the person who got axed was Tucker Carlson, the biggest primetime host they have, the most powerful person they have there in terms of the way he's plugged into, we hear about, Republicans really looking to him for their messaging and trying to stay in his favor. So I was surprised by it. And what has happened in the days since it's been announced is, if you're reporting on it, it's sort of a game of who's going to lie to me next, because there's so much spin about what it was that he had done wrong and what the Murdochs wanted and which executive inside the company he had insulted. What did the redactions have behind them from Tucker Carlson? And I think when it boils down to it, things could change. But the Murdochs eventually decided he was more trouble than he was worth.
And Sarah, they've fired big people before: Bill O'Reilly, Roger Ailes, Glenn Beck. My theory is that any time that an employee is seen as bigger than his chief honcho or owner, that he's in some kind of trouble. And that, you wrote this, so this appears to have been a decision by Lachlan Murdoch, the heir apparent, with the support of his father, Rupert. Did they just think, hey, as you say, he's more trouble than he's worth, but he also is acting like he's bigger than us?
That was the thing that Roger Ailes always said when he was running the network, that nobody's bigger than the network. And they got rid of Glenn Beck for that reason. I think that was in part what was at play. Rupert and, people are fighting over who actually made this decision, that nothing really happens without Rupert. But in this case, Lachlan was the one who made the sort of final call. Tucker had insulted a lot of people. I don't know how many people that are listening to this remember the documents that came out during the suit, but Tucker had insulted lots of people in really colorful language. James, you'll be able to relate to this colorful language, but Tucker was definitely more insulting than is sort of appropriate inside a company. And of course, they live with him saying outrageous things on air all the time, but it was sort of his swagger and what the Murdochs saw as him sort of bragging about their relationships and the way that they were going to protect him. And in the end, he said some pretty vile things about women and women executives at Fox. And he had lots and lots of advertising boycotts. They stuck with him and they stuck with him. And then I think the harsh reality of that settlement and the amount of money that they had to put out and the torture that company went through, I think this is now an effort to kind of regain some measure of control. And so it is the situation of you grew too big for your britches.
Sarah, we want to talk about the impact on politics too. James, I know, is going to get into that in just a minute, but let me just talk about what it means for Fox. The stock took a hit. The audience was down a little bit. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene are saying we ought to boycott Fox now. Based on the past, there's a temporary drop or dip. And then they find someone who's kind of a junior Tucker or whatever have you to come in, and it is more about the network. It is more about Fox. Which of those do you think, could this be a serious problem for them audience-wise? Or do you think that in 3 or 4 months it'll be Tucker who?
It seems like Fox always bounces back. You lost Bill O'Reilly at a moment, and Roger Ailes. And everybody thought that was going to be the end of the network. And after not very long, you had Tucker Carlson back in that spot. I will say that what Fox worries about more than anything is a challenger on the right. Now they have that much more than they've had in the past. And the people who are running it don't have the same kind of vision. You don't have Roger Ailes there anymore. But my bet is you have people who are turning on their television to watch the news. Yes, people have lots of other kinds of ways to consume media, but there is still such an embedded audience for that channel. I think it's going to be a long time before you see them really hurting.
James.
So Sarah, there are two theories here. This was a death by 1,000 cuts. He's just too much trouble for him. The Murdochs it was just one shit show after another, and they just had it and they let him go. The other is the Big Bang Theory, that there are these 90 tapes, and I think Abby Grossman is I saw her, she was on Nicole Wallace's show yesterday, and that there was some explosive thing that came to light the Sunday before the trial was supposed to start on Monday, and that forced them to do the $787 million. You make a good point. They've had to pay $787 million, and they got every shitty bit of publicity they could get with these texts. We don't know yet, but are you a death by 1,000 cuts theory or the Big Bang Theory?
This might be a cop-out, but it's, you know, everything everywhere all at once, which like it was death by 1,000 cuts. And then whether it was Abby Grossberg and what's in there, or whether I can't guess what's in Abby Grossberg's 90 recordings. Let none of us be in the position where all of our internal private texts and messages are dragged out in front of the world, for sure. That is, and this happened, remember, when we were right in the kind of early months of lockdown, because it's right after the 2020 election up to, and you know, so everything people are, you know, you're not just whispering to somebody in the hallway, you're putting every single thought into an internal company message or a text message. I mean, your point about Tucker, I think is interesting, because I thought what you were going to say is that he went from this sort of one figure to become something kind of very different. And that's a story that a lot of people have tried to puzzle out, kind of like whatever happened to Tucker Carlson. But I think what you're saying is that this is just him. This is just sort of the way that he talks.
James, you said he said these things in the green room. Yeah, he did. He said some outrageous things, I'm sure. But I don't think you and Paul would have sat there if he was saying racist, vile, misogynist, hate-spewing, Putin-loving stuff. I think he went beyond anything he did before. He became a hater, and that's what made him a lot of money.
Yeah, let me clarify. It's anything. I mean, it was about like management. All right, a company. It was just shit like you would say when, you know, like reporters say about management wherever they work. You know, a bunch of assholes. And, right. Okay. He actually prided himself on kind of not being a racist. All right, or at least that's what he would say, and
that's what he says. That's what he
says. I understand. Of course, but he never said any of the things like he was saying on Fox. But he was always a provocative guy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was always a provocative guy. But then something happened, and I think it was. I mean, there are so many of these stories that people say. And I think it happened during the Trump era, like whatever happened to, people say that about Maria Bartiromo. They say that about Tucker Carlson. They say that about Alex Berenson. I don't know if you know who that is, but he became a real COVID denier and had been, you know, there are all these people who were sort of either in one way or another slightly rejected by the quote unquote elite establishment for one thing or another, and then whatever happened to them, it was an aggrieved stance that just manifested into something different for each of them. But like in Tucker's case, it was, at least it appeared to be like a really, I mean, while he would laugh on his show sort of maniacally, he just seemed very angry, and in a way that, like, he was just sort of your happy conservative friend all over D.C. at a certain point, and that changed.
So I want to make one point in terms of Al. You know, he has said misogynistic things. Okay, that can be denied. Didn't he say? Okay, but I never knew him to have any kind that he ever hit on. I never knew him to be anything other than a faithful husband. I mean, I've never seen file a complaint about him. Inappropriate behavior. I mean, I'm sure
he's no Bill O'Reilly or Roger Ailes.
You know, they had pictures of Nancy. Right, but I mean, he had pictures of Nancy Pelosi in the swimming suit and Abby Grossman. He would say things that were totally inappropriate, totally the kind of stuff you should be terrible thing. But I know of no incident of him actually
James,
acting on
why don't you and Sarah talk about the effect
say
on the Republican Party for a while? Because Tucker Carlson was he was a kingmaker. And Sarah, do you have any sense of how Republicans are going to react to this and what difference it may or may not make?
I mean, you know, this is a part of the story that we're trying to get at, but for people like Mitch McConnell, I mean, this is fantastic. Like, there isn't somebody like Tucker Carlson who's attacking. I mean, let me say this, that Tucker did a very good job of appearing somehow independent from Trump while still really boosting that wing of the party with his show. And the establishment, you know how much he hated Mitch McConnell and anybody who would adopt an actual position of trying to govern. He just wanted the sort of flame-throwing types that had been sort of Trump acolytes. I mean, James, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it because you have a lot more experience in politics than I do.
Well, I understand. Tucker had actually been he was successful. He would give a lot of corporate speeches. He was canceled at CNN. He was canceled at MSNBC. He wrote a book that sold 1,100 copies. I would laugh about it. And he became this, like, I mean, say what you want about him, but he became this overnight, sensational icon maybe we haven't seen before. And it's just interesting that I was with him. He got hired by Fox on the Monday before the 2016 election, and he and I were in the green room getting ready to give a speech to J.P. Morgan.
But James, what effect is it going to have? Now, let's talk about 2023. If you're Ron DeSantis, if you're Donald Trump, if you're Kevin McCarthy,
they're gonna have to kiss his ass. I can already tell you. He's going to be somewhat of a hero. And who's to say the Uline or the Coke or somebody doesn't pay him $15 million to go on Newsmax? And if he does that, there's a non-compete clause, but, once you get fired, you have to go into that. But if he goes to Newsmax and he rejects Fox $20 million, which he has plenty of money. He's got family money. He's got money saved up. And he goes on there, he's going to hurt them. And people are going to pay attention to it because he's just going to be another victim that the left-wing media and the Washington Post and Sarah Ellison and Al Hunt and all the whole dinner party, UVA, Harvard, Yale, I don't know, Duke crowd did him in. I mean, you can just see
those old
shit
UVA elitists. Sarah, what do you think of that? Going to Newsmax.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting is that Bill O'Reilly was going to be somebody like that. Tucker has the best shot of making life after Fox really work for him. We've seen when Glenn Beck left, and this is a long time ago, but when Glenn Beck left Fox and he was sort of pushed out of Fox, everybody thought he was the face of the Republican Party. This is, if we're just playing the game now, because this is not
that's
actual,
what we do. That's what we do. We play the game. That's what we're here for.
The game is that Megyn Kelly and Tucker decide that they're going to go together to a place. And it could be Newsmax, probably would have to be somebody said, what if they, decided to go to CNBC? Because CNBC was talking about doing a conservative, late night. Again, we're just playing the game. I have no idea. But if there were a way you could sort of play, fantasy cable news anchors and decide what group you would get together to mount some kind of challenge to Fox.
Can I give you a tip for a story?
Yes, please.
And this is us gossiping publicly, but I'm 75% sure I'm right on this.
Okay.
He has been in Austin numerous occasions studying Alex Jones's business model. I'm telling you, and I think there's a good chance you could confirm this. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
I hope none of the journalists listen to this.
As Al will tell you, I engage in gossip. I repeat things that I hear. I don't know this for a certainty, but if I were a young, aggressive journalist, I would look into this. Because I think but my geological charts say there's a good chance that there's some oil underneath this shale rock.
And then we'll have some Tucker Carlson supplements.
Or whatever. I don't know, but I do believe on information and belief that he has made trips to Austin to look at Alex Jones's business model. Maybe the Harvard Business Review looks at studies the company. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm passing that on to you. Right,
he would be a
publicly in
worthy
front of God
successor
and the whole world.
to Alex Jones. They're both hate mongers. Sarah, poor old Don Lemon. I mean, he just became the walk on in all this. I mean, he became paragraph 3, and then you drop it. I don't think there's much to say about Don Lemon. Doesn't much affect CNN, does it?
I don't think so. The thing about the Don Lemon situation is CNN has been trying to make a morning show work for them for years, and they've never really been able to do it. That was, even back when Jeff Zucker came in, he was the wonderkind, and everybody thought he was going to be able to do it, and it never got out of third place. So Chris Licht comes in, and he's been at CNN now for a year. And the biggest thing they've done is reconfigure that morning show and put different people there.
I rise in defense of Don Lemon.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's from East Baton Rouge Parish.
Okay.
He's an LSU guy, and he tells me that his mother loves me. So any person whose mother loves me,
well, that may be a good thing, but I'll tell you, he was a terrible journalist on that show, and he criticized Caitlin Collins, and I watched it only 3 or 4 times. She's a lot better than he was, Sarah, as a journalist, and so.
Well, it's true that he and that kind of on-air chemistry that everybody always talks about did not exist on that show. It was the opposite. And you have Caitlin Collins, who sort of came up out of a conservative media into like mainstream media, and the two of them really did not get along. I think that Don, he worked on his own, but that was a bad pairing. The reason I bring up Licht, it's that when you're a TV person, and I've never been one, you have to sort of trust the people who are pulling the strings and putting you on air and who they're putting you on air with. And it just didn't, from the time that he said that women were past their prime when they exited their 20s, it was just a matter of time. Who watches morning television?
Sarah, you've been a terrific guest. Let me just finally ask you, a year from now, will Fox News be as strong as ever, or will they have suffered?
I think they're going to be fine. I answered this question in 2016 after Ailes was forced out, and I said that maybe their best days were behind them, which is also maybe true. Like, they were having more fun back when he was around and when there wasn't quite this. I mean, they were always on the outside of like the liberal establishment, obviously by design. And they've had scandal after scandal after scandal, but they are huge, and it is very hard to get what they've got.
I have one final question for Sarah before I let her go. But Al and I have both been fired from CNN, so okay, that is a matter of history. But it just strikes me, and I don't have anything in the game. I still got friends over there. It strikes me that right now they don't know whether to wind their butts or scratch their watch. I mean, they're still trying to figure. Do you have any sense that they have a strategic plan in place or anything like that?
For what though? Like what to do?
For just the network, the direction, the kind of programming they want. I mean, I just don't see. And maybe I'm not an expert on this, but you are. But do you see any formation of a strategic plan or identity or brand or anything?
We keep hearing different sort of ideas, but not a lot of execution. And so what you're looking at is, I mean, certainly when Zucker was there was a kind of fighting spirit, and they got to the point where it was a bit too much, where it was just so opposite. It was, it was like the anti-Trump network, and they defined themselves too much in that way. But this is just now, like, the people there do not, I mean, some people are just coming in and doing their jobs, but it does not feel like a cohesive, energized network that is got a mission that is clear to everyone who's there. No, I agree with you about that. Okay. And so I don't know what the strategy
James,
is.
let me make one final point, which you and I would you and I talk? This goes to Fox, Sarah.
Sure, go ahead.
I teach a class at the University of Pennsylvania, and one of the assignments I gave these students this year was for 2 weeks they had to watch MSNBC and Fox in prime time, and then just give me an analysis. And I guarantee you 90% of them are lefties. They don't agree with anything on Fox. And almost to a person, they came back and said that, but they said, Fox is much more interesting. The shows are more interesting. They move faster. It's just better. And I just think, I hate them, but I think they do television better.
People have said to me, and I agree with this, that you can hate Tucker Carlson's show, hate Tucker Carlson and his message, or you can hate his message. It's not as a human, but you can as a human, I guess. But people are, but if you watch the way that show is produced and the rhythm of it and the way that it is put together, it is creative and it really works. And in fact, it was a really well put together show. So maybe that's part of the reason why it was such a success, or it was just at 8:00 on Fox News, and whoever.
Yeah, there will be someone. Sarah Ellison, you have been a terrific guest, and we're going to keep bringing you in as this story develops. I hope we can get you back.
Follow up on my little Austin tip.
I will. I hope no other journalists are listening to this.
I don't think I believe not yet. You got. I think you got a 16-hour delay.
Hey, thanks, Sarah.
All right. Care. Thank you both so much. Take care.
Hey, we all have busy lives these days and can't afford to waste a day stuck on the couch because of a few drinks during a dinner meeting. The night before, Zbiotics is the answer. God, I wish I would have known about this 50 years ago. It's amazing how they used PhD scientists to pioneer the world's first genetically engineered probiotic to accomplish a greater good, tackling rough mornings after drinking and getting you back to business. Now, to fill you in, when you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for a tough day ahead. But Zbiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down and is designed to work like your liver, but in your gut. That's where you need it most. Just remember to drink Zbiotics before drinking alcohol. Drink responsibly and get a good night's sleep to feel your best the next day. How important is it to feel good enough to get back on the field even after an intense social or business demand, James?
About as important as anything you could think of. I'd like to get a cut of 5% of what they get in the city, and you always sell that stuff during Jazz Fest or Mardi Gras, or tell them what you get. But, this is something that, probiotics, you see them all the time. They're totally safe, a totally good thing. And boy, if this gives you any kind of advantage, and sometimes you go out there during the week, people go to cocktail parties or go to a book signing or something like that, and maybe you get a little more carried away than you should. Well, this gives you some confidence that the next day you're gonna be ready to rock and roll. And that means a lot.
Well, you go on long runs after long nights, and that's right, with New Orleans humidity. Every time we have a Zbiotics before a drink, it makes such a difference. The next day, even after drinks at the client dinner the night before, you'll be ready to jump into action right after waking up. You'll feel ready to go with Zbiotics, whether it's writing all day, going for a run, or going in front of an audience. Give Zbiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/PWR to get 15% off your first order when you use code PWR at checkout. Zbiotics is back with a 100% money guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/PWR and use the code PWR at checkout for 15% off. You also can grab the link from our show notes. Hey, thanks, Zbiotics, for sponsoring this episode.
Absolutely. Thanks. Great product, great concept, great idea.
Hey, James, there's so much bad news this week. I'm going to turn to something I kind of like, and I love, as a matter of fact, these NBA playoffs. I think my favorite moment was when an average Memphis Grizzly player, Dylan Brooks, insulted LeBron James, calling him too old. In the next two series, LeBron proceeded to school his tormentor, leading the Lakers to a series win. You know, Mr. Brooks, be careful when you go after the king. But I tell you something else that occurred to me, James, in watching these games, which I think have been great. This is an American-dominated sport. But I have a suggestion to the NBA's Adam Silver, easily the best sports commissioner. A week before the regular season starts, next time, stage a huge charity game benefiting at-risk children around the world in Madison Square Garden, televised globally, pitting the best foreign players against the best American-born players. The foreign players' starting lineup might be Nikola Jokic, Giannis, the Greek Freak, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, against an American team of LeBron, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler. Man, what a game that would be. And you could attract a lot of attention. And you basketball fans out there, think about it. Who would you bet on? I'd bet on raising a lot of money if they'd do that.
I do, and it'd be like, you know, by the way, you point out, since America is located in the United States, well, Canada also, but I think something like 30% of NBA players were not born in the United States. Don't hold me to the exact number, but it's pretty substantial. And the contributions that they're making are just staggering. And, you know, we're not even a walk in the Olympic Games anymore.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And,
no.
You know, yeah, it's something to see. And I think there would be a great deal of interest in that. And the thing about basketball, you could do it on Christmas Day. I mean, it wouldn't be that. It's not like baseball or football where you screw up your starting pitching and, you know, it just takes a week to recover. I think it's a terrific idea. I really do. And I'm surprised. And knowing those guys, they can do things. I mean, they can do things and do them competently. And I agree with you. He might be the best commissioner there is in sports.
Oh, he is. Easily.
So I had all kind of outrages. And I wanted to talk about this Kansas City case, which I think is so illustrative about so many things. But I got to tell you, if you're reading the new thing on the right, and they've hired 150 lawyers, it was pretty well reported recently in the Washington Post, which sort of got my blood flowing. It had the NPR devoted a good bit of time on it today. It's NPR-y, but if you wade through it, you can find out what they're talking about. This child labor, like, these companies are going into Iowa legislature, like the Senate has already passed something about putting 13-year-olds in meatpacking plants. All right, now think about that. And you work in there, and the employees are not allowed a bathroom break. They have to wear diapers. And so these assholes come, they support these candidates that don't want any immigration. They support ripping the heart out of whatever social safety net we have in the country. And then they say, well, look, if you got a 13-year-old kid, we can pay them $6 an hour, and they can clean caustic soda out of things. There's something called the Packer Sanitation Services, Inc. How bad of people can you be? And let me tell you, the Supreme Court, and you mark my word, they're going after the Reconstruction Amendments. You know they're going after the right to vote very successfully. That does not even exist anymore in this country, all right? They're totally ripping equal protection and due process. They're ripping the guts out of that. And I'm telling you the next thing, and do not laugh. They're going after the 13th Amendment. Because what they want, and what these companies want, and what is going to be totally fine to Gorsuch, going to be totally fine to Alito, is child slave labor. They'll have a figment. So it's not slave if you're paying somebody $2.50 an hour or whatever they do. They're going after the freaking 13th Amendment. And what, you know, and what they're doing is they're talking about Bud Light while they're trying to get 13 and 14-year-olds working in freaking meat packing plants. And when you read about it, they've hired 150 lobbyists. I wish somebody would write the name of every lobbyist who's making money trying to make the world safe for 13-year-olds to work in meatpacking plants.
Name them.
Name them. Put their names there. All right? Who they are.
Yep. Okay,
in the law firms, and I guarantee you, a lot of these people that are lobbying this are in big-time law firms. All right? You mark my word. They are hiring I want to come back to this, and I'll be more precise because I don't want to get, Fox News here on Dominion before I start calling the names out. But I'm getting the names of the companies that are supporting this. And people need to know this. Child labor. And, maybe it's just so affected me because I've got February the 3rd, my new grandson. Could you imagine him or Kai, your grandson, working in a freaking meat packing factory at 13 or 14 years old? And when you do that, it's somebody else's kid. It's a child. And God Almighty, there is no bottom to the rottenness and greediness of these people.
We're gonna keep on this, and we're gonna keep on how sad Iowa's become. My old dear friend Michael Gardner, who just loves his home state, just dies every time we talk about it. Okay, we'll come back. Okay, now, James, for our questions from our terrific listeners, I want to point out ahead of time that I seem like such just a crotchety old man on this, but I'm not gonna read questions if you don't tell me where you're from. Mark, you and Jake both wrote great questions, but you said I'm not going to tell you where I'm from, so I'm not going to read your questions. I'm sorry, I'm just a crotchety old man. But send in, tell us where you're from, and we'll read them next week. Let's start off with Red in New Orleans, Louisiana.
All right, Red.
James, Red wants to know what the MVP of Democratic political strategists, that's you. Red, let's upgrade it. Let's talk about the GOAT of Democratic political strategists.
That's not the washed up.
I want to know what the GOAT thinks about the putting Social Security ad from Trump's PAC on DeSantis. Biden is definitely running again, so would you like the odds better against Trump or DeSantis?
Well, I appreciate the question. The one thing I know, I don't have very much influence on the Republican side, but I do love the fact that they're going after each other on Social Security and Medicare. Because for all of my life, everybody said, well, that's demagoguery, that's what Reagan said. There you go again. Of course they went and they did the same thing. So I think it's encouraging that they've accepted the premise that we have said for a long time. I got to tell you, Susie Wiles, and I've said this on this show before multiple times, it was Pat Summerall's daughter. I read a piece on the New York Times. She's 65 years old. She has enormously sharp elbows. She was the person that did a lot to make DeSantis, and Mrs. DeSantis knocked her off, and she's now at Mar-a-Lago. And DeSantis, he just got his bell rung, and he is not doing well. And she and Roger Stone, I'm sure, talk 6 times a day. And I don't think DeSantis said, I think he's used to run against Charlie Crist or Andrew Gillum. He's playing an entirely different game right now.
I don't know,
but I want the fight to continue.
That's a good point. Susan Wiles, I don't know her, but she seems like
I don't either.
Too good a person to talk to Roger Stone. But that's
not
politics
so.
anyway.
I think she's. My guess is that she's mad.
With cause.
She is. Yeah, with cause. But she got knocked off, and she's not happy.
Right. Rebecca in Coral Gables, Florida, and Vanessa in Singapore ask a almost identical question. And they both are huge fans of the show, which we love, going from Coral Gables to Singapore. She said, respect your insight and love the way delivered, but what's your take on Dianne Feinstein not yet retiring and holding back Democratic Judiciary Committee nominations? Rebecca and Vanessa, Dianne Feinstein has been a really good senator. She did some important work on intelligence and getting out information about those awful covert operations and torture. And she's done great work on gun control. It's time to leave. She's 89. She's not up to the task. And I hope she resigns tomorrow.
So there's been a lot written about male senators that didn't resign. I remember in 1991, when I was doing the WaPo campaign, the most powerful person in the United States, well, maybe Mitchell, but second was not even a senator. It was a guy named David Strauss. And he was Quentin Burdick's chief of staff, and Quentin Burdick was incapacitated, and he was the chairman of Environment and Public Works. And people have gone through all of the number of male senators that didn't have to resign, and there's some argument to make that there's a different standard. I think the difference here is not so much gender related, is they have barely a majority, and they can't function without her vote. But I have to tell you, there's been a lot of pushback that she's being held to a different standard than male senators who have faced similar dilemmas and sometimes even worse. So I just want to acknowledge that, but I do think the circumstances of the narrowness of the majority add something to this.
I totally agree with you on that. And there was Strom Thurmond, I think his name was Duke Short, who was the senator from South Carolina. And poor old Strom didn't even know who he was. And, he was 99 when he got out. But anyway, the circumstances are
Thad
different.
Cochran. Thad Cochran.
The last year.
I mean, this is, I know, but again, just so you know, there is an argument to make that is somewhat persuasive that they're holding females, and again, I point out that if there were 54 Democratic senators,
it wouldn't matter.
It probably wouldn't.
Right, I agree.
You know,
Bob in Chincoteague, Virginia. I love Chincoteague. Go down and watch those ponies. We used to do that with the kids. He said, James, this is to you. When you discuss no labels being evil, I wanted more depth. You usually bring to a discussion. Would you go further? Is there a risk of any third party being a spoiler in the next election? We need some facts about this.
I will gladly go into it deeper. First of all, it is the brainchild of Mark Penn, who, let me be very careful what I say, this is accurate. He was the chief strategist for the Hillary 2008 presidential campaign. And in December of 2007, Mark Penn didn't even know that California was a winner-take-all seat. And he doesn't there's a lot of money to be made here. They present themselves as looking for solutions. They call themselves no label. They're trying to get on a ballot in swing states. The only possible thing that can come out of this is to reelect Donald Trump. The only possible thing. And by the way, do you know who a big donor to no labels is? Don't tell anybody. Harlan Crow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So if you think that something that Harlan Crow is donating to is in the interest of the United States and the Democratic Party, then I don't have much. We don't have much to talk about. But if you think that they're not evil, look at what we know about their donors, and look at what their effect is, and look at where they're trying to get on the ballot. They are there is no doubt this is a right-wing front organization designed to make money for a select few people.
Okay. There also was a piece somewhere a couple months ago on what a toxic work environment it is there. But in any event, Greg in Atlanta, Georgia, said, while I recognize political conventions have somewhat lost their luster, any thoughts on the Dems picking Chicago over, say, Atlanta as the host? It seems like Chicago provides an easy attack to the weak on crime or big city elitist charges. You know, Greg, maybe if there's a crime wave in Chicago, bad one next summer, it'll hurt a little bit, but I doubt it. You know, the site of a convention has almost nothing to do with how a candidate does in the fall. Obama picked Charlotte in 2012. A good convention, it really was. Had a good time down there. Lost North Carolina. It was 4 years earlier. McCain picked Minnesota. You know, fine convention, I guess. Sarah Palin lost it. It just doesn't matter. The only convention, I've been covering them for over 50 years, the only convention that I think made a little bit of a difference was the Republicans picking Detroit in 1980, because it sent a signal that we are not the country club old elites that we have been depicted as the past. And I think that helped Reagan a little bit. But my view is that the site of a convention is one of the most irrelevant things for a political presidential contest, James.
This I know, that you have to, in order to get these conventions, you have to raise a lot of local money, all right? They just do. And, of course, Georgia has a Republican governor, a Republican legislature. Of course, Atlanta had a Democratic mayor, so Chicago's got a new mayor. And the reason they're going there is J.B. Pritzker, because J.B. Pritzker told the DNC, if you come to Chicago, I can raise you $50 million. And he can, or if he don't raise it, he can write the balance out of his checking account. I can't understand why somebody hasn't figured that out. They would hold that convention in bumfuck Egypt if somebody said they'll cover the cost for it.
I like bumfuck.
Republicans. Okay, they don't care. And you're right, exactly right. Don't matter where you have it.
Right.
I tell you, I think what they should do, my idea is have it in freaking Las Vegas. Okay, so it's 115 in August. You got a gazillion hotel rooms. You can put in, water misters and air conditioning and your own Pacific time, and you're done at 8:30 at night, and you can have fun. And, but the idea that you pick a convention, they're trying to say something political with picking Chicago and not Atlanta, it's all about the money. The money.
Well, I agree. It doesn't make any difference. Chicago is a great convention. It's a great city
to be in. It's great.
The United Center isn't the most easily accessible place.
Actually, Atlanta a little more accessible downtown. Both have huge airports. You can get to either Atlanta or Chicago.
So there are places I wouldn't be crazy about going to, but if if they could wheel me into Chicago in 2024, I'll be happy. Pam in Hiram, Maine. I don't know. Let me hear from the Angus King people. Where is Hiram, Maine? Last week, 2 weeks ago, Tom Etzel says the Democrats have got to get the working class back. But Pam asked how. If they don't want to, she says if they don't want to raise the minimum wage, affordable daycare, reasonable college tuition, etc. I think what she means is if that doesn't do it, what will? What will bring them back? Is the problem really as simple as cultural divide and voters aligning with grievance, resentment politics? Good question.
Well, let me start with a negative statement. We're not getting the working class rights back. All right, at least not is for the foreseeable future. But the difference between losing the working class, 78 to 22, and losing 72 to 28 is all the difference in the world. We've got to understand that. There's not going to be a sweeping reversal of people, particularly that are ingrained in them, and a lot of them are over 50. But the trick is lose by less. That's not very inspirational. It doesn't sound very war roomy. It doesn't sound very, let's go, win one for the Gipper or any of the other stuff. But what you got to do, and you got to keep emphasizing this, and you got to keep working it, and you got to keep building on losing by less. And that you can do. By the way, one thing about Maine, do you know that Maine has the highest percent of rural population than any state in America? And so keep that in mind. And, Maine can be instructive. And, Democrats basically win a lot of elections.
They do. I do. I think Maine, too, is one of the 3 or 4 most rural districts in the country.
Right. And I think that guy Golden, who's an interesting guy, he's a little bit different, a little bit out there, but he's an interesting guy. He's a good politician, able to survive. Hopefully we have Governor Shapiro on next week. I feel pretty confident we're going to have him on pretty soon. And he did much better than you would expect in these rural areas in Pennsylvania.
By doing exactly what you just said. It's not so much you want, he cut the margin, and that made a huge difference.
Cut the margin.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. He didn't lose. He didn't win Blair County, but he lost by less.
The next is from Paul in Austin, Texas. That is not Bagala, I'm sure. And this is Paul asked about book banning. It says, why not get Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and agnostics to be, quote, uncomfortable, end quote, with books that suggest Christianity is the only path? Or African Americans are uncomfortable with uncritical presentations of slavery, or Jews are uncomfortable with stereotype portrayals of bankers or media owners. Paul, you're engaging in satire here, and I think you're absolutely right. It shows how ridiculous book banning is. The idea that you can't have students read a book that someone's going to feel uncomfortable with. I want to feel uncomfortable about some things. Am I not supposed, to read about slavery? Am I not supposed? I think the founding fathers were great geniuses, but they made a couple huge mistakes. One on race and the other on Native Americans. That's just a fact. So, their batting average was, 80-20. That's pretty good.
If I think about one of my favorite scenes in a movie, and I think that we should actually think about doing a 30-second clip in Field of Dreams, where they had the book banners at the meeting, and Amy Mattingly was saying she called that woman a Nazi cow. and it was, you should, and I'm going to look at it tonight. But I think it's illustrative. I think that slavery and the Holocaust are something to feel uncomfortable about. When they say, if you teach us, you're going to make kids uncomfortable, well, it's kind of something to be uncomfortable about. I'm a little bit of a defender of the Founding Fathers a little bit, because there's a pretty significant school of academic thought that said that slavery is not enshrined in the Constitution, that the founders, of course, they couldn't do anything about it at the time, but they left a trap door open. That's the theory of Sean Wilentz, and I don't argue with Sean. There are a lot of people that disagree with him. He's totally intellectually.
I love Sean Wilentz, but 3/5 of a vote, ain't exactly
there was Madison. They couldn't pay, either that or you don't have a constitution.
No. Look, James.
I know. I'm just saying that there is historical evidence that they knew this was going to bite us on the ass.
Right.
Okay, that's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and as I say, I think they were great. I mean, God, what an incredible collection of talent. But they weren't perfect, and I think you ought to read about the imperfections too.
Of course you should. Absolutely.
Let me give you another example. I think FDR was one of our 2 or 3 greatest presidents. I revere FDR. If someone said if you could cover someone that you never covered, it would probably be Roosevelt. But what we did not do as much as we could have done in the late 30s and early 40s about what was happening to Jews in Europe. That's just a simple reality. I think people ought to read about that. That doesn't mean
they should, and they should read that we exempted agricultural workers from Social Security, which code for blacks.
Exactly. Right.
Okay, we can read the stuff some of the things that Lincoln had to do. All right, you can do anything you want. Roosevelt passed the Social Security, exempts agricultural workers. You're right. And we need to know about this. We should not hide it.
Right. That's the point.
History also, a lot of the people on the left don't want history to have any context. All right, and the historical book that I recommend is the Adam Hochschild book, Bury the Chains, and his new book, American Midnight. If you think the shit today is bad, or even to the extent maybe the shit, before the America of 1918, oh my God, it really brings that to bear, and it's worth anything Adam does is really worth a read. And it's how they got, what public sentiment was about the slave trade and how they got about it, and the role that William Wilberforce and the Quakers and people like that played in this is quite a remarkable story, and we need to learn that too.
Our final question is from Seth in Muncie, Indiana, and I can set the table on this. Seth's question is, we have an amazing candidate in Muncie named Jeff Robinson who really has what it takes to win a competitive race, but the biggest problem is that we have the perception of the local Democratic Party after recent scandals. So I looked this up. Jeff Robinson is a Democrat running for mayor of Muncie. They did have a Democratic mayor prior to the current mayor, mayor who is a Republican, and that Democratic mayor was indicted and I guess sent away for a year for taking illicit money of some sort. I don't want to go into details because I don't know him. So I think Seth's question is, okay, Jeff Robinson's a good guy, and the Democrats have been hit with this previous guy who left office 4 years ago. So how do you handle it? Our odds are good if we can figure out a way to, I guess, both message and raise money for this campaign.
Yeah, I spoke to the Indiana Democrats this past summer, and the party chair seems to me to be quite able guy. There's some able people, and don't do very well electorally in Indiana, but there's some able people there, and I don't know enough of the facts to do this, but I think they're trying to build a state party, and they're pretty aggressive, and I would consider bringing them in, and. They're going to blame the Democrat in Muncie for something that happened. Well, Trump's going to be indicted for, God knows how many different things.
Our over and under is 2.5.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but I'm not familiar with it. And you just said the mayor's race, which tricked me into reminding the race for the mayor of Jacksonville is May the 16th. Jacksonville is by far the largest city in Florida. It's kind of a Duval County. It's a kind of weird system of government there, but I think the city limits of Jacksonville are, I can't think of the word, but the same as Duval County. And it's DeSantis' home county, and if it's kind of a swing county in Florida, and the Democrats have been consistently overperforming, not just in Wisconsin, but in places like Virginia and other places around the country. And I think that this is going to be a little bit of a tell. I think this is it's not the equivalent of the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, but it's one we should pay attention to. My friend Nikki Fried is the chairman of the Florida party. They're trying different things. The black vote is a big freaking problem. My idea is to bring the Tennessee 2 in, which maybe can help, but we'll see if that happens, and we'll see what happens. But good luck to y'all in Muncie. And we had very little, by the way, we've had very few Democratic mayors in recent history in Jacksonville, and we could change that around. It's a city that's 3 times as big as Miami or Tampa.
All right, Seth, we'll keep our eye, too, on Jeff Robinson in Muncie, Indiana. Keep those questions coming in, and I'm going to make a plea to Mark and Jake. Tell us where you're from, and we'll get to them next week. Thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, Henson Shaving and Zbiotics, in the show notes. We thank you for supporting them, because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our war room planning.